February 9th, 1945. First light. The kind of cold that makes your lungs burn with each breath. Unteroffizier Hans Kruger stands at the gate of Lagerfeldkirchen, staring at an order that makes no sense. Use 500 Soviet prisoners to harvest frozen potatoes, or watch 20,000 German civilians starve to death in 3 weeks. The absurdity is mathematical. Men who should be guarded must now be fed, equipped, trusted. Kruger watches the first group of 50 prisoners march toward frozen fields, agricultural tools on their shoulders. One of them, identified only as Prisoner 237, looks back, not with hatred, with something impossible to name. That look will be documented in 6 different diaries. What Kruger doesn't know, he's witnessing the moment when hunger erased every border the war had drawn. He's silence. 50 meters away, past the barbed wire, past the watchtowers, past every regulation he's ever followed, lies 800 hectares of unharvested potato fields. The crops have been frozen in the ground since November. Every able-bodied German farmer was conscripted 6 months ago or fled west ahead of the Red Army. The mathematics are brutal. 20,000 civilians in 3 surrounding villages, 3 weeks of rations remaining. After that, starvation. Not the gradual kind. The kind where children stop crying because they lack the energy. G deteriorates toward the end of the report, as if he could barely hold the pen. The final line reads simply, "We are out of options." Eating 800 tons of potatoes from frozen Bavarian soil before March. Other priorities. The Eastern Front was hemorrhaging. The Western Front was crumbling after the Allied push through France. Potatoes could wait. UIP meant that no longer existed. Everything metal had been melted down for weapons production. Everything rubber had gone to vehicle tires. Everything that could burn had already burned. Effectively zero. He submitted his final report on December 2nd. It contained a single recommendation: immediate deployment of emergency labor force. Any labor force. The response came back stamped in red ink. No labor available. Prioritize military production. And said something that would be quoted in 4 different memoirs. Herr Oberst, I have come to ask you to save German lives using Russian hands. I understand the insanity of this request. Earn over. Current count, 502 prisoners, fit for labor, approximately 470. The rest too weak, too sick, too broken. All of us, starting with the children. N to 52. One thing united them: survival. They had survived the initial capture, survived the transport west, survived 6 months in a camp where rations averaged 1,200 calories per day. Men who survived that are not weak. Issued agricultural tools from abandoned farms, and walked into the frozen fields with 500 men who had every reason to kill him. Erman learned from his grandmother, replied, "You are asking wolves to guard sheep." By evening formation, Volkov counted 6 prisoners who couldn't stand without assistance. The German guards looked equally defeated. They had expected resistance, violence, escape attempts. Instead, they got something worse. Visible, measurable failure. T technique. Dig at 45-degree angles. Let the sun exposure during midday create minimal thaw at the angled surface. Use leverage, not force. That evening, Korzen approached Kruger with a drawing scratched in the dirt. Showed the technique. Kruger looked at it for a long time, then asked, "Why are you helping?" 10th, new technique implemented. Production, 362 kilograms. Still catastrophically insufficient. 800 tons needed. At current rate, they would need 647 days. They had perhaps 90 days before civilian mortality became irreversible. Tet of 9. Kruger's first thought, this is a trick. His second, why would starving men volunteer for more labor? Prisoner 112, a former factory foreman named Alexei Sokolov, explained through a translator, "We freeze standing. We freeze working. At least working we move. And if there's food at the end, we eat. You feed workers better than prisoners, yes? Or is too sick to work." Created a direct incentive. Productivity equals food. It was pragmatic, brutal, and it worked. As factory supervisors, men who understood systems. The Germans provided tools, transportation, basic medical care. The Soviets provided techniques learned from generations of winter farming in climates that made Bavaria look tropical. Battle where prisoner Volkov had been captured, though neither would ever know this. She lived in Rosenheim with her mother and 3 children in 2 rooms that once housed only her mother. The ration card system had collapsed in November. Official distribution, 200 grams of bread per person per day. Actual distribution, sporadic, sometimes nothing for 3 days. Then a sudden delivery of potatoes, then nothing again. For food. Just lay in bed, staring. Margaret knew what this meant. She had seen it in 1918, during the last war's hunger winter. The body shutting down to conserve energy. The final stage before complete organ failure. Her mother suggested the unspeakable. Take Anna to the camp. Leave her at the gate. Sometimes the guards had extra food. Sometimes they showed mercy. Eldkirchen. The temperature was minus 15 degrees. Anna weighed perhaps 14 kilograms. Should have been 20. Margaret could feel her daughter's ribs through the blankets. Could feel the weakness in her breathing. And of the frozen fields. Opal, documented in 3 separate diaries, would become the moment that defined everything that followed. A prisoner working near the gate, Volkov, saw the exchange, saw the child, stopped working, walked to the fence, reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a potato, raw, partially frozen, part of his own daily ration, held it through the fence toward the child. Yes, no exceptions. He stood there, hand on his sidearm, facing Volkov. The silence lasted perhaps 10 seconds. Later, Kruger would describe it as the longest 10 seconds of the war. Old from Munich, recorded in a letter to his mother. Today I watched an enemy save a German child. I no longer understand what we are fighting for. Our civilians are dying. They're working harder because of it, not for Germany. For the same reason anyone works. To mean something. Ed would later be called the Feldkirchen Protocols. Soviet prisoners, applying Russian winter farming techniques, had increased per-man productivity by 312% compared to German agricultural standards. But that wasn't the remarkable part. Laborated with prisoner mechanics to repair broken equipment using salvaged parts. Another guard, whose name appears in records only as Schmidt, worked alongside prisoners to develop a lever system that reduced the force required to extract frozen potatoes by 40%. Asian and civilian population. Recommend continuation of current protocols. He included detailed documentation, photographs, productivity charts, and one sentence that would later be highlighted during post-war analysis. Labor force morale appears surprisingly high given conditions. Val, instead, got responses that defied military logic. Almost. A starving German child is identical to a starving Russian child. Both cry the same way. Both die the same way. I cannot stop what happened in Leningrad, but I can stop what happens here. That's not mercy. That's mathematics. More people alive is better than fewer people alive. 22 degrees. If the storm lasted more than 4 days, work would become impossible. Would lose perhaps 9 to 12 days of productivity. Mathematical calculations showed this would push completion date beyond April 1st, beyond the point where civilian mortality could be prevented. Lanning meeting. Waldman later described it in his memoirs. We sat at the same table. German officers, Soviet prisoners, civilian administrators, discussed the logistics of preventing starvation as if we were colleagues. For 40 minutes the war didn't exist. Productivity even in extreme cold. German side provides fuel for fires. Soviet side provides rotating labor, combined for continuous operation. LD for conscription to assist. Waldman organized delivery of firewood. Every unused chair, table, fence post in Rosenheim was donated. People burned furniture to save strangers. Ostly just not freeze. Something without name. Ianth, within survival window, mathematics bending toward possibility. Dare, 41 years old, career SS officer, reviewed documents for 3 hours. Production logs, ration distribution records, guard rotation schedules. Then asked one question. Why are your guards working alongside prisoners? Interaction. Made argument irrefutable. Reflect this. Continue. Visible to higher command. Just 500 prisoners, 24 guards, and 20,000 civilians knowing the truth. Small carvings from wood scraps, primitive figures, animals, flowers. Each prisoner made one. Presented them to guards as thanks for fair treatment. The guards, most barely 20 years old, many far from home, many receiving first kindness in months, cried. Volkov recorded the scene. We made grown men cry with wooden flowers. In this moment, we won war. Not the political war, the human war. Empty 3 days. Ice began melting. Ground began softening. Extraction became easier. Production exceeded 3 tons daily. 194 tons total harvested. 546 tons remaining. 26 days until estimated completion. Hunger that meant something. Argaretha wrote letter to her dead husband. Never intended for mailing. Just needed to tell someone. Heinrich, today our daughter thanked the man who saved her. He is Russian. He is prisoner. He is enemy. And he is the reason she lives. I don't understand this war anymore. Maybe I never did. Tirade plateauing. Still elevated. Still tragic. But no longer catastrophic. Waldman's calculation. Harvested potatoes to date had prevented approximately 473 deaths, most under age 12 or over 65. Rate. We're beyond civilian ration system because they weren't registered residents. HE tons. Minimum nutrition over 12 days. Addicts. Ing 6-hour rest periods. Production immediately increased to 4.1 tons daily. But cost was visible. Men collapsing. Frostbite cases increasing despite warming weather. Medical officer treating on average 8 severe exhaustion cases daily. Treating German guards. No distinction. Just broken bodies needing care. Refugees being saved by Soviet prisoners. The complexity was so absurd it became simple. Everyone just worked. 0.3 tons. Completion date pushed to March 24th. Still within survival window. But margin for error eliminated. It's declining. From 47 per day in January to 11 per day in March. From catastrophe to tragedy. Not good, but better. Measurable better. Mathematics bending toward life. Where your 4 days rest means 4 days less production. Means someone dies who shouldn't. I'll rest when this is finished. Me age. Same profession, same family structure. One of us wore gray uniform. One wore striped uniform. Only difference was which side of fence we started on. That night I stopped seeing prisoners. Just saw people. Assured. Gratitude owed to brave workers of all nations. Kov's response, recorded in Margaret's diary. Your mother saw her grandchild live. That's more than my mother saw. She died in Leningrad siege before my daughter's 2nd birthday. Neither of us could save our mothers. But we saved your daughter. That's something. Won't know. But if anyone asks what I witnessed, I will tell them about that moment, when grief didn't care about nationality. Yes, civilian representatives. Schreiber made speech. Short, factual. You accomplished the impossible. 500 men extracted 847 tons of food from frozen ground in 3 months. You worked harder than any labor force I've commanded. You saved approximately 20,000 civilians from starvation. You did this despite having every reason not to. History will not record this. Official reports will not acknowledge this. But everyone here knows what happened. You remained. Human when humanity was optional. That's worth more than medals. A stood straighter. Held formation. Showed discipline equal to any military unit. Showed respect earning respect. Nung Waldman organized distribution. First harvest delivery to civilian population. 300 kilograms to Rosenheim. 200 kilograms to surrounding villages. Not luxury, just survival. But survival tasted like potatoes, and potatoes tasted like life. Explained, prisoners grew them. Prisoners who were enemies, but helped anyway. Archers more than agricultural workers. Logic was bureaucratic. Final, non-negotiable. Letting impossible task. Reward was transferred to harder labor. Several prisoners collapsed emotionally, not physically. Emotionally. Months of hope crashing into reality. They saved 20,000 German civilians and would be repaid with harder captivity. Remain in region. Argued they posed no security risk. Provided valuable agricultural expertise. Deserved minimal dignity of remaining where they were valued. Petition forwarded to regional command. Denied within 4 hours. Could spare bread, preserves, letters, tokens of gratitude. Did something that mattered. Red prisoners received thanks from 300 civilians they saved. Most meaningful military ceremony I've witnessed. No parade, no medals, no flags. Just humans thanking humans. That's what we lost when we started this war. That's what they gave back. Okol punished publicly, not privately. Hoffman Waldman, stamped from Regional Agricultural Office. As official as possible without being actually official. Schreiber's response, because 50 years from now, someone will ask what we did in this war. I want to answer, we fed people. All people. Even when policy said not to. That's worth any discipline. Nears given final meal at Feldkirchen. Potato soup. Using potatoes they harvested. Volkov's diary. Last meal in camp that became home. Eating food we created. Surrounded by guards who became colleagues. Leaving for place where we returned to being just prisoners. Soup tastes like goodbye. No shame in it anymore. Abels didn't matter anymore. We spent 3 months working alongside them, eating alongside them, surviving alongside them. Now they're just numbers on transfer manifest. System erased what we built, but cannot erase what we learned. That enemies are only enemies until you work beside them. Then they're just people. Cold people, hungry people, people who helped anyway. Rees letters, official reports, agricultural yield data, mortality statistics, mathematics that prove the impossible. He died without harvest. Think about those months frequently. We were enemies forced to cooperate. Discovered we preferred cooperation. That knowledge sustains me through difficult times. Reminds me humans can choose something better. Geez. Soviet Union, used savings, took risks to travel west. Came anyway, stood in German cemetery, saluted German officer who once commanded them. Guard of honor from former captives. Only documented case of this occurring. Remembering that lesson. Ted, everyone looks human. That photograph of Volkov, age 70, standing in same field where he worked 45 years earlier. Visiting Bavaria as tourist. Invited by Margaret. Standing in wheat field that replaced potato field. Smiling. Elderly man who once saved strangers, now seeing those strangers' grandchildren farming land he once harvested under guard. Tie-in is identical. Confusion, followed by silence, followed by question. Why would enemies help? Answer is simple. Answer is complicated. Answer is, they stopped being enemies when work became more important than war. Out ideology. We needed help. They provided help. Not for Germany, for humans. That winter, 500 prisoners taught 20,000 civilians and 23 guards the same lesson. Categories are convenient until you need each other. Then categories disappear. Only people remain. 96,266 additional life years generated by 94-day harvest operation. Children who survived grew up, had children, had grandchildren. Today, estimated 11,000 people alive trace lineage to civilians saved by harvest. Fewer people alive. Simple equation. Profound result. 8-war Bavaria. Academic language couldn't hide human story. 500 enemies, 20,000 strangers. 3 months, 800 tons, thousands of lives. One lesson, humanity persists in system designed to eliminate it. Ends remembered with gratitude. Worked. Work created something forgiveness couldn't. Created proof that cooperation possible even between enemies. Created precedent. Created hope. That's worth more than forgiveness. That's worth remembering. Matters more than fighting people. Save each other. Not because policy demands it. Because mathematics proves it. Because hunger doesn't care about flags. Because children are children regardless of nationality. Because 500 men in winter of 45 understood something their commanders didn't. The war worth winning isn't against enemies. It's against the hate that creates enemies. Ori that counted. Victory that lasted. Victory measured in lives saved and lessons learned. And grandchildren living because grandparents were saved by people who should have been enemies, but chose to be human instead. T chapter, light persists. Not because someone commanded it, because someone chose it, because 500 someones chose it, because choice matters, because work matters, because life matters more than war. Proved conclusively and permanently that hunger is stronger than hate, and cooperation is stronger than conquest, and humanity is stronger than war. We can't, even when war says we're enemies, better than our worst moments. We are capable of more than our darkest hours. We are human, and human means choice. And choice means we can feed instead of fight, save instead of destroy, live instead of hate. LP, even in darkness we can choose light.